There is a trail in the Santa Monica Mountains where the oak trees grow thick on the ridgeline, and the chaparral slopes fall away into golden ravines. On a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, a man named Alan Flores clipped his helmet, checked his tire pressure, and pushed off on a route he had ridden dozens of times before. The air smelled of sage and dry earth, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath his wheels and the distant call of a red-tailed hawk riding thermals above the canyon. He had no reason to think this ride would be any different from the hundreds that had come before it. He was wrong. If you have ever wanted to understand what it feels like to be prey, to exist not at the top of the food chain but somewhere in the middle of it, to feel the ancient, cellular awareness that something larger and more powerful has chosen you as a point of interest, then what happened to Alan Flores on that trail gives you the closest possible window into that experience. And if you want to keep watching stories like this one, stories pulled from the wild edges of the natural world, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. Alan was about 40 minutes into his ride when he first felt it. Not heard it, not saw it, felt it. There was a change in the quality of the air, a subtle shift in the stillness of the brush beside the trail, something that the rational mind immediately tries to explain away as wind or imagination or the rustle of a ground squirrel. But some part of Alan, the very old part that existed long before language and cities and bicycle helmets, knew immediately and with total certainty that something was there, something that was watching him. He did not stop. He kept pedaling, and the feeling did not go away. Mountain lions, known to scientists as puma concolor and called cougars, pumas, and panthers depending on where you stand on the continent, are one of North America's most successful large predators. They have the broadest natural range of any wild land mammal in the Western Hemisphere. They exist from the cold forests of the Yukon all the way down to the windswept tip of Patagonia, and across that enormous range they have learned to survive by being, above almost all else, invisible. A mountain lion does not hunt by speed. It does not have the open ground acceleration of a cheetah or the pack strategy of wolves. What it has is patience, concealment, and an almost supernatural ability to remain unseen in terrain where you would swear nothing larger than a rabbit could possibly hide. It moves like a thought you almost had, like something glimpsed at the very edge of your peripheral vision that has already vanished by the time you turn your head. In 30 years of living in California, Alan had never seen one in the wild. Most people never do. The mountain lion sees them, though. The mountain lion almost always sees them. The Santa Monica Mountains run in an east-west chain between Los Angeles and Ventura County, a surprising wilderness pressed against the edges of one of the largest cities on Earth. This is puma country in every sense. Population estimates vary, but researchers studying the Santa Monica mountain lion population have tracked somewhere between 10 and 15 individual animals using this fragmented landscape, moving between the coast and the foothills, threading through culverts under freeways, navigating the hard edges of suburbs, and retreating into the deep chaparral where the canyon walls are too steep for development, and the scrub oak grows so dense you cannot push through it without tearing your skin. These are animals living genuinely wild lives in a profoundly unnatural landscape, and that combination of wildness and proximity to humans creates encounters that would have been unthinkable in a different era. Alan came around a wide bend in the trail and began the section he always looked forward to, a long, gradual downhill where the trail opened up and the view stretched west toward the ocean, the Pacific glittering in the afternoon light like something poured and left to set. He let himself coast, breathing out, the wind catching the hem of his jersey, and then, in the brush about 30 feet off the trail to his right, something moved. Not a small movement, a large, deliberate, unhurried movement. The kind of movement that belongs to something that is not afraid of you noticing it. He turned his head. For one full second, no longer, he saw it clearly. A mountain lion, a large one, tawny and pale and enormous, its body low to the ground, its round, flat face turned directly toward him. Its eyes, catching the light, were the color of old gold. And then it was gone, back into the chaparral so quickly and completely that he immediately began to doubt what he had seen. He pedaled harder. He did not doubt it for long. Adult mountain lions in California can weigh anywhere from 90 to 160 pounds for males, with females somewhat smaller but no less capable. They are built with deep chests, long hindquarters that store explosive muscular power, and paws that are disproportionately large, designed for gripping and holding rather than simply striking. Their primary prey in California is mule deer, and they are extraordinarily effective at killing it. A mountain lion typically approaches its prey in a slow, controlled stalk, using every available piece of cover, closing the distance over minutes or sometimes hours until it is close enough, usually within 30 feet, to launch a final charge that lasts only a few seconds. It kills with a bite to the back of the skull or the nape of the neck, a precise, efficient dispatch that reflects millions of years of evolutionary refinement. They are not vicious animals in any emotional sense. They are simply very, very good at what they do. Alan did not know the size or sex of the animal he had seen. What he knew was that it had been large, that it had been close, and that it had been watching him. He pulled out his phone to check the time and realized, with a cold feeling, that he was still several miles from the trailhead. Ahead of him, the trail curved back into the scrub, losing the open view, narrowing between walls of tall chamise and ceanothus, where visibility dropped to almost nothing. He thought about turning back. He looked behind him. The trail was empty and still, and the brush on either side was completely opaque. He did not know which direction the animal had gone, so he went forward. Researchers who study mountain lion behavior have noted something that consistently surprises people when they learn it. Mountain lions spend an enormous amount of time observing. Before they are predators, they are watchers. An individual lion may follow a potential prey animal for extended periods, sometimes covering significant distances, assessing speed, assessing behavior, looking for signs of vulnerability or weakness. In their primary prey species, they look for animals that are old, injured, or moving erratically. But they apply this same basic assessment to anything unfamiliar in their territory. They are curious and they are cautious, and those two traits together produce behavior that can look, from the human side of the equation, deeply unnerving. Being followed by a mountain lion does not necessarily mean you are being hunted. It can mean you are being evaluated. But that distinction offers only limited comfort when you are the one being evaluated. Alan made it around the first bend without incident. The trail climbed slightly, and he shifted down and began to work, standing on the pedals, breathing hard, his heart rate climbing for a reason that had nothing to do with the gradient. He crested the small rise and stopped, straddling his bike, scanning the brush. Nothing. He pulled out his water bottle, drank, and was just starting to roll forward again when he saw the mountain lion a second time. It was above him, on a rocky outcropping to his left, perhaps 25 feet away, sitting in a posture that was almost casual, its long tail curling slowly back and forth. It was looking at him with an expression that revealed nothing at all. He shouted, a loud, sharp, wordless sound, the kind of thing that comes out of you before thought has caught up. The mountain lion did not move. It blinked. He shouted again, waving one arm. The lion stood, stretched in a slow, boneless way that seemed entirely unhurried, stepped off the rock, and disappeared back into the brush. Alan got back on his bike and pedaled. He did not stop pedaling. There is a principle in mountain lion safety guidance that is repeated across ranger stations and wildlife agency websites and outdoor survival manuals throughout the American West. Do not crouch. Do not kneel. Do not make yourself appear small. Never turn your back and run. And above all, do not stop moving. The reasoning behind this last point is not that movement frightens mountain lions, because it does not. The reasoning is that the moment you stop, the moment your motion ceases and you become a stationary shape in the landscape, you take on the characteristic posture of prey that is given up. In the predator's calculus, stillness is a signal. Motion, particularly confident, directed, forward motion, reads differently. It says this thing knows where it is going. It says this thing is not wounded, not lost, not vulnerable. And for Alan Flores, somewhere on a narrow trail in the Santa Monica Mountains on a Tuesday afternoon, this principle was about to be tested in the most direct possible way. He came to a section of trail he had always found challenging, a steep technical descent with loose shale and exposed roots, where you had to slow down, had to concentrate, had to pick your way carefully between the obstacles. He entered it at speed, trying to carry as much momentum as possible, but the trail demanded what the trail demanded, and within 50 yards he had slowed to a crawl, picking his front wheel through a gap between two large rocks, his back wheel skittering on loose stones. He was almost stopped, and that was when he heard it. Not a roar, not a snarl. Something quieter than that, a sound like a large body moving quickly through brush that is too close to where you are. He glanced left. The lion was there, in the brush not 15 feet from the edge of the trail, moving parallel to him, keeping pace. When he slowed, it slowed. When his wheels stopped turning, it stopped too. It was not hiding now. It was not pretending to be invisible. It was watching him openly, tracking his movement with those pale, golden eyes, and every time his speed dropped, it came closer. He got through the rock section in a burst of effort that left his legs burning and his lungs raw, and as the trail opened up again and he accelerated, the lion fell back. He did not look behind him. He kept going. The thing about fear in situations like this, real fear, not the manufactured adrenaline rush of a horror film, but the genuine, biological, body-level terror of being in proximity to something that could kill you, is that it does something interesting to time. The world becomes extraordinarily detailed. Every sound arrives separately and with perfect clarity. The gravel under the tires, the wind in the scrub, the distant traffic sound from the freeway far below, the creak of the bike frame, and underneath all of that, the silence where the lion is. Because a mountain lion makes almost no sound when it chooses not to. 130 pounds of muscle and bone can move through chaparral without producing enough noise to hear. What you are aware of is the absence of other sound. The birds that were calling have gone quiet. The ground squirrels that were moving in the brush have frozen. The whole small community of creatures that exists alongside a predator has responded to its presence in ways that the predator itself takes no notice of, but that a human nervous system, if it is paying any attention at all, can feel like a pressure change, like the atmosphere before a storm. Alan stopped once more, involuntarily, when his front tire hit a deep rut he had not seen in time and nearly threw him. He caught himself, 1 foot down on the trail, and spent perhaps 3 or 4 seconds getting himself upright and moving again. 3 or 4 seconds. In that time, he heard the brush move, heard it and felt it. The displacement of air that comes with something large moving quickly through dense vegetation. When he got his head up and looked to his right, the lion was at the edge of the trail, literally at the edge of the trail. Its paws were almost on the dirt. It was lower now, its head dropped, its shoulder blades rising above the line of its back, and something about that posture, the architecture of it, the way the animal had arranged itself, communicated meaning that needed no translation. Alan made himself very large. He stood over his bike to his full height, raised both arms above his head, and screamed. Not words, not instructions, just sound, raw and loud and continuous. And he kept screaming as he got back on the bike, and he kept pushing forward, not looking back, not slowing, making as much noise as he was capable of making. Behind him, the brush did not move. When he finally let himself look back, the trail was empty. He made the trailhead with his legs shaking and his throat raw and his hands trembling so badly that he had difficulty working the combination on the bike lock. He called the park service from the parking lot, still breathing hard, still checking the tree line at the edge of the asphalt. The ranger he spoke to was calm and professional, and not particularly surprised. There had been other reports in that area in recent weeks. A trail camera had caught images of what appeared to be a large male. The trail would be temporarily closed while rangers assessed the situation. Alan was told he had done the right things. He was told he was very lucky. He was told to write down everything he could remember. He sat in his car for a long time before he started the engine. Mountain lions have lived in the mountains behind Los Angeles for as long as those mountains have existed. Long before the city, before the freeways, before the hiking trails and the mountain bike routes, and the trailhead parking lots. They moved through this landscape as its primary large predator, keeping deer populations in check, maintaining the health and structure of the ecosystem by hunting the weak and sick and old, their presence invisible, but their influence everywhere. The bones of their kills enriched the soil. The deer that avoided the canyons where lions hunted let the vegetation recover. The small scavengers that fed on lion kills, the ravens, the coyotes, the beetles and flies, existed in relationship to the lion's success. The mountain lion is not simply an animal in this landscape, it is an organizing principle of it. But the landscape itself has become something strange. The Santa Monica Mountains are surrounded on almost every side by development. The freeways that cut through and around them are not just inconveniences for wildlife, they are genuine barriers, walls of sound and metal and speed that animals must find ways around or through. Researchers have documented mountain lions, identified by radio collars and camera traps, making extraordinary journeys to navigate this fragmented world. They slip through highway underpasses in the small hours of the morning. They move through golf course maintenance corridors and along the edges of equestrian properties and through the brushy arroyos that run between housing developments. They are living double lives, wild animals navigating a human world, and the stress of that navigation shows up in their biology, in their genetics, in the surprising degree of inbreeding detected in local populations that have become too isolated from outside gene flow to maintain healthy diversity. The mountain lion that followed Alan Flores may have been any of several animals known to research teams monitoring the Santa Monica Mountains population. It may have been the large male captured on trail cameras near that area in the weeks preceding the encounter, an animal showing no collar and no ear tags, an animal with no individual research designation, simply a wild lion living a wild life in the hills above one of the most densely populated metropolitan areas in the world. Or it may have been an animal that researchers did not know about at all, which is entirely possible, because the capacity of a mountain lion to exist, genuinely exist, unseen within very close proximity to large numbers of humans, is remarkable and consistently underestimated. Consider the case of a mountain lion that spent an extended period living in territory that included portions of residential Ventura County, an area of suburban neighborhoods and small ranches and school grounds. Motion-triggered cameras eventually revealed an animal that had been moving through this space, hunting deer in the green belts and riparian corridors, resting in the brush along the edges of properties, walking through backyards on nights when the houses were dark and quiet, for what appeared to be several months before anyone was aware of its presence. The evidence, once the cameras were reviewed, was startling. The lion had walked within 30 yards of occupied homes on multiple occasions. It had rested in the shadow of a wooden fence while a family barbecued on the other side. It was there, consistently and substantially there, and nobody had known. This is not a story about a rogue or dangerous animal. It is a story about the extraordinary competence of a predator at existing on its own terms in proximity to creatures it has learned to be cautious of. Humans began moving into mountain lion territory with increasing density through the 20th century, and for the most part, mountain lions responded by adjusting their patterns, becoming more nocturnal, more careful, more deliberate in how they used the landscapes they shared. In California alone, the lion population was thought to have been pushed to very low numbers by the early 20th century, through a combination of habitat loss, persecution by ranchers protecting livestock, and the effects of market hunting on deer populations, which removed the lion's primary food source. A bounty on mountain lions remained in effect in California until 1963. They were not given formal legal protections until 1990, when Proposition 117 passed and made it illegal to hunt them. In the decades since, populations have recovered, and that recovery has brought lions and humans into closer and more frequent contact. Not because the lions are becoming bolder or more aggressive, but simply because there are more of them now, and they are moving through landscapes that have, in the decades of their absence, been thoroughly colonized by people. Most encounters between mountain lions and humans end without incident, and without the human even being aware of them. The lion sees the hiker, or the runner, or the cyclist, assesses the situation, determines there is no advantage in pressing further, and withdraws. This is the normal outcome. But there are exceptions, and those exceptions matter, because they illuminate something important about the animal's decision-making process, and about the role that human behavior plays in shaping the outcome of these encounters. The scientific literature on mountain lion attacks in North America covers a relatively small number of confirmed incidents spanning several decades. The vast majority of documented attacks involve either a human who stopped moving or crouched down or ran, behaviors that trigger the predatory sequence in a cat that was perhaps initially only curious or assessing, or a child or small adult whose physical dimensions more closely match the lion's primary prey profile, or a human who surprised a lion at very close range, activating a defensive rather than predatory response. In almost every case where the human behaved in the ways that guidelines recommend, making themselves large, making noise, maintaining eye contact, moving forward rather than retreating, the outcome was better. Not always, not perfectly, but better. Alan Flores had, without formal training or prior experience, done almost everything correctly. He had not run. He had not crouched. He had made noise. He had made himself appear large. He had maintained his forward motion. And every time he slowed, the lion had come closer, a pattern so clear and consistent that it functioned almost like an experiment in real time, demonstrating the direct relationship between the human's apparent vulnerability and the animal's willingness to close the distance. When he kept moving, the lion tracked but did not press. When he slowed or stopped, the lion moved in. The implications of that pattern are not lost on anyone who studies the behavior of large cats. Researchers in California and across the western United States have been working for years to understand the inner lives of mountain lions, the ranges they require, the social structures they maintain, the ways they communicate across territory, and the factors that influence when and why they make the decisions they make. Radio collaring and GPS telemetry have revealed animals covering enormous distances, with adult males maintaining territories that can exceed 200 square miles in less productive habitat, though territories in the resource-rich Santa Monica Mountains tend to be significantly smaller due to the density of available prey. Female lions with kittens are intensely territorial and intensely cautious, rarely wandering far from the den site, hunting close to home, avoiding the territories of large males whose predatory behavior extends, in the terrible calculus of mountain lion life, to the killing of kittens that are not their own. The social life of mountain lions is organized around scent, sound, and space, rather than direct interaction. Adults maintain distance from each other through a sophisticated system of scent marking, using scrapes in the soil covered with the animal's waste, spray marking on rocks and trees, and the arrangement of caches, the buried remains of kills that announce an animal's presence and status in a territory. Two adult males do not typically share a territory, and the boundaries between their ranges are maintained through this chemical and behavioral language rather than through constant physical confrontation. But those boundaries shift. Animals die. Young males disperse from their mother's territory when they are somewhere between 1 and 2 years old, and must travel, sometimes extraordinary distances, to find unoccupied space. It is often these young, dispersing males, animals that have the drive to hunt, but have not yet fully refined their skills, animals that are testing the limits of their own capabilities and exploring unfamiliar terrain, that appear most frequently in human-occupied spaces, and that generate the encounters that make headlines. There is a mountain lion that researchers have designated P22, a large male who famously established his territory in Griffith Park in the heart of Los Angeles, a fact that became something close to legend in the city. 42 lived for years within a few miles of millions of people, photographed occasionally, tracked by his GPS collar, glimpsed sometimes by very lucky residents of the Los Feliz and Silver Lake neighborhoods through which he occasionally moved at night. He died in 2022, and the city mourned him. He had become, in a way that surprised even the researchers who tracked him, a figure of genuine civic affection, a symbol of the wildness that persists at the edges of human civilization, despite everything we have done to push it back. His story, like the story of the encounter on that mountain trail, speaks to something that a lot of people feel but find difficult to articulate, a complicated gratitude for the existence of creatures that do not need us, that owe us nothing, that live by rules older than anything we have built. The mountain lion has been on this continent for a very long time. Its ancestors crossed the land bridge from Asia during the Pleistocene, and the species has weathered ice ages and mass extinctions and the loss of the great megafauna, the mastodons and giant ground sloths and American horses that once shared this continent, and on which the ancestors of the modern puma may have fed. When the human hunters arrived on the continent perhaps 15,000 years ago, the mountain lion survived. When the great extinctions of the late Pleistocene swept away so many of North America's large mammals, the mountain lion survived. When European colonists arrived and began systematically trying to eliminate it, the mountain lion survived. It is an animal shaped by deep time, refined through millions of years of selective pressure, into something so well adapted to the demands of its life that it can persist in landscapes that would break lesser creatures. The hills behind Los Angeles, the urban edges of Denver and Boulder, the scrubby foothills of the Diablo Range, the river corridors threading through Phoenix, the mountain lion finds a way. That persistence comes at a cost that the lions pay, and that we are only beginning to properly account for. Road mortality is one of the leading causes of death for mountain lions in California, and for animals living in the Santa Monica Mountains, the freeways that surround and bisect their habitat represent a constant and lethal hazard. The 101 freeway, running along the northern edge of the mountains, has functioned as a near impenetrable barrier for much of the mountain lion population's recent history, preventing the genetic exchange between north and south populations that would maintain the kind of diversity that keeps a population healthy and viable over the long term. Researchers have documented the effects of this isolation in the genetics of animals from the southern population, finding levels of inbreeding that, if allowed to continue, could undermine the population's long-term viability. The solution, a wildlife crossing over the freeway at Liberty Canyon, has been built after years of advocacy, fundraising, and planning, a structure designed specifically to reconnect habitat fragmented by the road, giving mountain lions and mule deer and bobcats and coyotes and all the other animals caught between the pavement and the sky a way through. Whether the lions will use it, and in what numbers, and whether it will be enough to reverse the genetic consequences of decades of isolation remains to be seen. But the effort itself says something about a shift in how we understand our relationship to these animals and to the landscapes they require. Alan Flores went back to that trail. Not immediately, not for several months, but he went back, and he has been back many times since. He rides differently now. He is louder, more present in the landscape, less inclined to put earbuds in and lose himself in a playlist, more inclined to pay attention to the quality of the silence around him, to notice when the birds stop calling and the brush goes still. He has not seen the lion again. He does not know if that means it is gone or simply choosing not to be seen, and the distinction, he has realized, matters less than he once thought it would. The lion is there, or something like it is there, moving through those hills on its own schedule, hunting deer in the oak groves, resting in the shade of the canyon walls in the heat of the afternoon, marking its territory in the language of scrapes and scent, carrying on the ancient work of being what it is. Alan rides his bike through that landscape. The lion does what lions do. They share the space, imperfectly and unequally, the way humans and wild things have always shared it, which is to say on terms that have never quite been agreed upon, and are always being renegotiated by proximity and circumstance, and the particular character of a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. There is a kind of knowledge that comes only from being watched by something you cannot fully see, something that has assessed you with senses sharper than yours, in a language you do not speak, by criteria you will never fully understand. It changes the quality of your attention. It makes the world feel larger and more genuine than it did before, and it leaves you with a strange and specific gratitude, not for having survived, though of course you are grateful for that, but for having been, even briefly, in the presence of something so entirely itself, so thoroughly wild, so magnificently indifferent to everything you thought you were. There are places in California where the edge between the human world and the wild one is thin enough that you can step across it without meaning to, on a weekday afternoon, on a trail you have ridden 100 times before, in a landscape that looks, from the right angle, almost ordinary. And somewhere in the chaparral above you, patient and unhurried, ancient and perfectly equipped, something is watching. It was watching before you arrived. It will be watching long after you have gone. And in the moment when you feel that gaze on the back of your neck, when every fine hair on your body stands up, and the rational mind goes suddenly, brilliantly, quiet, you understand something that no amount of reading or watching or listening can quite prepare you for. You understand what it means to be small in a large world. You understand what it means to be alive in it too. The mountain lion that followed Alan Flores down that trail in the Santa Monica Mountains was not an aberration. It was not a broken animal, or a starving one, or a particularly bold individual that had lost its natural wariness. It was simply a mountain lion doing what mountain lions do, which is to say, it was investigating, assessing, and testing the edges of the world it lives in. It encountered something it had not encountered before in quite this form, a human on a bicycle, moving through its territory at a speed that confused the usual categories, not slow enough to be clearly prey, not fast enough to be clearly safe, and it followed the thing, and watched the thing, and pressed forward when the thing slowed, and pulled back when the thing moved with confidence, learning what it needed to know. By the end of the encounter, the lion had information it had not had before. Whether that information changed anything about how it moves through that terrain, whether it made it more or less likely to approach the next cyclist it encountered, is something we cannot know. The lion carries its own knowledge in its own way, in the body memory of a predator, that learns through experience, through touch and smell, and the felt outcome of every encounter it has survived. It is not so different, in that respect, from Alan Flores himself, who carries the memory of that afternoon in his body too, in the way he scans the brush when he crests a rise, in the way he never rides in silence anymore, in the way he moves through that landscape with a different quality of attention, a sharper and more honest awareness of everything that shares it with him. The Santa Monica Mountains will outlast the city that surrounds them. The chaparral will persist long after the last highway has crumbled. And in the deep canyons and on the rocky ridgelines where the scrub oak grows thick and the wind moves through the sage in the long afternoon light, the mountain lion will carry on, as it has always carried on, patient and capable and precisely itself, moving through the world it came from, watching everything, missing nothing, waiting for the moment when something slows down,